the share button. I think that worked.
Okay, so now we see the whole thing. Oh, there you go.
All righty. Well, I do want to thank you all for letting us come and present our project for you. And, you know, this is going to be a very large and generational decision that the EWEB board will be making here early next year. And the project is the Leaburg Canal Strategic Evaluation Project, and it's an EWEB organizational goal, number 3A. And you know, for some folks who may not get upriver, up the McKenzie River Valley, the Leaburg Canal is a power canal that helps provide water to the Leaburg power generating facility that is not currently operating, and it's adjacent to the McKenzie River. And this blue hatching signifies the McKenzie River. And this red hatching signifies the Leaburg Canal, which is experiencing some challenges, which you'll hear further about in this presentation. And it's about a half hour east of Springfield and the Eugene Springfield area as well, for those who haven't been up that way. And just some fun facts about the Leaburg Hydro Project. It was constructed in the late 1920s. There is a dam, it has a bridge, it's a low hazard dam. The project can generate up to 15.9 megawatts, which allows, which can, you know, provide about 2.5 or up to 3% of EWEB's power supply when it's in full operation. It also is a stormwater conveyance facility. It intercepts a handful of creeks that are on the north side of the canal. When it's in full operation, it has an irrigation supply to some farming community and some residential community. And we have been working with those stakeholders also to provide water in the time that our canal is not fully operational. There's transportation aspect. The dam does provide a bridge to some residential homes, as well as a park adjacent to the hydro project. And, you know, the project also has a lot of recreational facilities that many of you may have enjoyed. It has the Leaburg Lake, which is known for some paddleboarding, fishing, and boating, has a boat ramp. There's Canal Trail that is adjacent to the nearly 5-mile long canal. And also there's a Lloyd Knox Park there as well. And there's fish passage facilities have been in place since the project was constructed in the late 1920s. Here's just some historic photos of the construction of the project. They're kind of fun to look at. They're old. The project was, you know, pretty much state of the art when it was built. The dam and the powerhouse are still in good shape and don't have very many deficiencies that can't be mitigated very easily. The primary concerns are going to be portions of the canal, as you'll be described a little bit later here in the presentation. And here's the general background of our strategic evaluation project. There's approximately 20 years remaining on the joint Leaburg-Walterville FERC operating license, and it's going to expire in 2040. And FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, pardon me. And it's currently operating as a stormwater conveyance solely since it was dewatered in 2018 due to a few deficiencies. There'll be substantial canal safety improvements needed in order to return to safe and reliable power generation or stormwater conveyance, as we'll discuss a bit later. And canal safety improvements are also necessary to continue safe conveyance of stormwater. And this project's going to affect many stakeholders with near-term and long-term decisions. And the near-term decisions will also greatly impact the long-term decisions as well. And there's two major problem areas that were identified along the canal. And the first area is the Cogswell Creek Reach, and that's partially down the canal. And this area has internal erosion and seepage. And the next area of concern is our Ames Reach. And the primary issue there is it's a very steep embankment, and it's also has a lens of liquefiable soils underneath, which can cause some seismic instability in the event of a seismic issue. In addition, FERC will require our infrastructure to withstand a million-year flooding event due to the potential for life loss and property damage. However, the life loss potential is very low, but it's not zero. Here's a slide that just depicts the Cogswell Reach area of the canal that is experiencing some challenges. The embankment in this area has historically had seepage, generally since it was constructed in the late 20s and went into service in 1930. The primary reason is it was filled over to stream bed gravels, which are permeable, and it just experiences seepage as well as the seepage blankets that we attempted to correct the seepage with just did not perform satisfactorily to FERC. And also note that the McKinsey hatchery has an intake that supplies water from the canal, which would generally be McKinsey water at this point, to the canal, as well as Cogswell Creek intercepts just west of the bridge there. We're facing west in this photo. And also note that the Cogswell Creek has an intake upstream, which would be to the right on that photo, that does supply the hatchery with Cogswell water. This is our Ames Reach, and this is where the canal embankment starts to become tall and steep, posing risk during a seismic event due to oversteepened embankments and a lens of liquefiable soil underneath the embankment. And this reach here is nearing the end of the canal. And just a little discussion on internal erosion. This is a mitigation effort we attempted, and it's basically what's called a seepage blanket we're constructing in this photo. And that's also a seepage weir. And the seepage weir allows for monitoring sediment loss from within the embankment. And that's the primary concern with sediment loss that can create, essentially an uncontrolled release of water in some circumstances. And there's also a small little photo that shows a subsurface geotech investigation that helped us identify this liquefiable soil in parts of the canal embankment as well. You know, and moving on to our roadmap of decision-making for this project. This roadmap details a timeline for the triple bottom line analysis, and a triple bottom line analysis, entails economic, social, and environmental aspects of any large decision of this project. And we completed an initial TBL early in 2021, mid 2021, and we also selected a consultant team near the end of 2021 as well. And we selected a consultant team to assist with this effort, and we also started crafting our communication and stakeholder strategy near the end of 2021. And we initiated a water quality study, and we began to refine the alternatives that will be further discussed. And we'll also be nearing the end of this. We are nearing the end of the analysis. And our EWEB board is going to be provided a recommendation by the project team in about a month or so. And we're hoping they can evaluate that information throughout December and possibly early January and make a decision early next year. And our alternative analysis, we initially started with 11 alternatives. And we performed detailed analysis on those 11 alternatives, and we rendered them down to the 4 most feasible analysis for a very detailed TBL analysis, economic, social, and environmental, drilling down on those alternatives. And of the 4, we have 2 return to service options, and we also have 2 decommissioning alternatives as well. And unfortunately, we could not do anything and just leave the canal in a status quo condition. It was not an option. And just a little summary of our return to service options. We have 2 of them. And one of them is a full facility restoration of the existing power generation configuration. And what that entails is rehabilitating the full length of the canal, which is approximately 5 miles, to meet our current safety standards. And that entails also lining and reconstructing portions of the embankment to address seepage and the seismic stability issues. We'll also strongly consider adding a spillway at Johnson Creek for extreme flooding conditions. And mitigating a potential extreme flooding event is a FERC requirement. During an extreme million-year catastrophic event, Johnson Creek can exceed the operational capabilities of the canal in its current condition. So adding a spillway mitigation is a likely alternative part of the alternative that we're going to consider. And also our partial return to service has a hydro facility plant that's going to be located about 1.25 miles or so from the headworks, the canal intake. And what we'll also do is modify the remaining 4 or so miles of canal for safe stormwater conveyance. And some of the highlights of these alternatives are the dam will be remaining in place, the lake will remain in place, and the canal intake facilities will remain for power generation. Something to note on this partial hydropower plant, this plant would have a nameplate or a capacity of 6.2 megawatts, which is less than half of the full service option that could generate up to 15.9 megawatts of power. So this is just a partial service return, and we were expecting, just under 5 annual megawatts with different outages, maintenance, and river flows. And our decommissioning alternatives that are being further evaluated is a full decommissioning. And what that essentially looks like is as if the project never existed to the most approximate pre-project conditions that's possible now. It's, note there's an extensive amount of development that has happened in the area. And so the pre-project conditions may not look exact like it did in 1920. And we'll remove all the structures, including the dam, fish passage facilities, the canal, power generating facilities, and we'll restore the tributary creeks that are currently intercepted by the canal back to the McKenzie River. This will entail large culverts or small bridges to underpass Highway 126. And we have a partial decommissioning alternative being considered, and that's our stormwater conveyance model. And that's returning portions of the canal to pre-project conditions where practical. We'll remove the dam, lake, and select creeks and restore those flows back to the McKenzie. And we'll have to modify the canal embankments for safe stormwater conveyance. And that also kind of coincides with the high flow events I described earlier with Johnson Creek, where some of the creeks, the Cogswell Creek and the Johnson Creek, can put out an extensive amount of water in a high flood rain event. So we'll have to, construct the embankments to be safe for allowing stormwater to get to where it needs to go. And both of these alternatives will likely entail a new bridge in the approximate location of the dam that is going to be removed if we choose these paths. In the next group of slides, we're going to discuss our triple bottom line update. And we initiated a triple bottom line analysis to identify and study the social, environmental, and economic impacts of this project. EWEB subject matter experts evaluated and identified specific attributes that will be detailed in the next group of slides. We also identified the top 3 attributes in each category, which we'll share later. And our primary social attributes that we have identified and have been drilling down on is public safety, local economics and resiliency, property value impacts, water rights and supply, environmental justice, recreation, visual and aesthetics, historical preservation, firefighting resources, local transportation network, tribal resources, and insects and pests. And, the property values is greatly associated with the upriver community that lives most near to the project is kind of what that entails there. And our primary environmental issues are climate impacts, water quality, aquatic resources, air quality, and terrestrial resources. And just to note, these are preliminary. There's a big decision to be made and a myriad of stakeholders that'll be gathered to help us develop this plan when it's chosen. And so additional attributes can be identified at that point. So just note that if we miss something, it still may be realized and considered during the project development. And the primary economic issues are rate impacts, capital cost, operations and maintenance, our net present value, which I'll show a bit more about in the next couple of slides as we get into the economic section, our hydropower value, resiliency, and just various miscellaneous cost economic issues, including, FERC licensing and liabilities and power contract compliance, EWEB bond capacity, financial resiliency, and just a myriad of other project impacts. And we performed a net present value analysis, and essentially a net present value is an all-in cost considering future cost, and we discount those back to current dollars. And our NPV is based on an approximate 18 years of license negotiation, planning, design, and construction. And as you see, they're deep in the red, all four alternatives. With our full decommissioning, the NPV all-in costs there is 224 million in the whole, as well as the full return to service is nearly the same cost at 241 million in the red. And our partial return to service is $184 million in the red, as well as the stormwater conveyance is also tied at $184 million in the negative there. So these are some substantially cost impactful alternatives that we're attempting to decide and move forward with. And that's why it's a generational decision our board is going to make here soon. And we have a range, and the expected range of our baseline NPV or our NPV is due to high capital market considerations and or high capital with a low market considerations, as well as a high capital and a low market conditions. And our baseline here is shown in blue. And our, I'm sorry? Yeah, net present value.
So he wants to know exactly what that means.
So yeah, so a net present value, and Mark can probably clean that up a little better than me if I don't get that right. So a net present value is essentially the all-in cost, and that's also revenue and and cost associated with the project, operations and maintenance. If we say return to service, there's revenue from some power generation that get folded into the mix, licensing cost, just anything that can come our way over the license period. And our net present value time period extends to 2076 because this is a long-term decision. And if we are to relicense and return to service, we're going to negotiate and expect that we'll have 40 years of power generation to make the project have some value. But as the net present value shows, even with the cost of the capital improvements, the power generation doesn't actually return the investment to us. So it would still be in the red, even though it would be generating power and collecting some revenues. Now, keep in mind, power prices in the future are unknown and speculative. So, the future is a bit hard to know. But net present value is essentially an all-in cost, considering everything over the life of the project. And we basically, that's with the assumption of $2022. And right. I guess, is that is there anything you need to add to that, Mark?
No, I think you did a nice job. The idea is that we've got some near-term costs, very substantial near-term costs that Jeremy was describing in terms of all those capital investments that we need to make to improve the canal. And then we also, for the net present value, look at all the future cost streams, like Jeremy was saying, the power sales revenue, as well as the ongoing operations and maintenance costs. And the idea with the net present value is those future dollars aren't the same as the current dollars. So we use what's known as a discount rate to turn a dollar in the year 2075. What's that worth in today's dollars? We calculate that using a discount rate so that we can compare each of these alternatives in terms of 2022 dollars.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and please note the upfront capital cost investments estimates. They were provided by consultants, so we have a really high level consultant team that's been helping us. It's a group of engineers and economists, and so they help develop our upfront costs that are a major input into this NPV. And they were further refined by EWEB subject matter experts. And our capital cost, the construction cost, relicensing costs essentially, and permitting costs, things like that, they have a large range of -15% to +50%. And so that's a big reason why you see this differential between the high capital and low capital streams on these NPVs there. So that's a big input into why you see that differential there. And that large capital investment estimate range, -15 to +50, is essentially just due to all the uncertainty and the fact that this is a quite conceptual set of designs. These 4 alternatives, they're very not very developed designs at this point, just because we have to focus on drilling down on those as we find a decision to make and move forward with those. So it's quite a large range there, and you can always hope for the best and have a low upfront capital and possibly high markets on any power sales if we were to go that route.
Chairman,
just
we have a question here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Mark mentioned the discount rate. What discount rate did you use?
4 and 6% are our discount rates. And so we've run different sensitivities using both of those numbers.
Right. And then, Jeremy, I think we also included in the net present value analysis some inflation.
Yep,
at
2%.
About 2%.
Right. So that the NPV also does, like Mark was saying, does capture 2% inflation, and and that is something we really thought a lot about. But our economics analyst and just others that they're looking to make forecasting on do not expect the current high inflation that's being experienced now to be the long term. So just that's why we're continuing on with the standard 2% inflation. And risk and uncertainty is just a huge factor in any large project and decision that goes out to 2076 and this long term. Just so many things that we wish we had a crystal ball to know the exact answers, or a magic 8 ball to tell us what the future holds. But unknown and changing regulatory requirements are always something that can affect a long-term decision. Changing economic climate, future market prices, and replacement power options. So if we were to go back to service, it's hard to predict exactly how the future market prices on selling the power will be, as well as if we do not go back to service and we have to replace that power someday. It's hard to know exactly what those replacement costs are going to be. I'd like to caveat the replacement power costs with, at the present value or at the present time, EWEB is long on power, so we're not short of power. Even though this facility is offline, we're still able to deliver our services to the community reliably due to we are currently long on our power supply. And additional things to consider is just change in river flows, with climate change, other aspects. We're also impacted by the Cougar Reservoir, which does, do flood control and has a large dam that does, control the river level. And so we're at the mercy of what water comes down the river in order to generate. So we do need, a specific volume of water to generate. So there's always risk in how much water that comes down the river channel for us in the future. And also there's always going to be rights associated with just water rights in general and generation water rights. So EWEB does have currently has a generating water right. It's a hydro water right. So, if we choose to not generate, we may lose that water right, and it'd be quite hard to obtain a water right of that that magnitude again in the future. So those are some of the risks. There's many more, but those are some highlights.
We have another
You know,
question from the
yes.
audience.
I'm wondering about if you choose a total decommission, would we lose the recreational asset of Leaburg Lake?
Great
Did you hear
question.
that?
I did. Yes, I did. And that's a great question. And with the 4 alternatives being shown today, yes, Leaburg Lake would be restored to its natural river state prior to the way it looked before the project was constructed. And the dam will be removed at that point, so that won't impound that water anymore. So you're correct. Under these 4 alternatives, that is what would happen. However, we are also running a sensitivity analysis, or we're running an analysis on not generating power. It'd be a very similar as our alternative 4 there, which is our stormwater conveyance alternative that we detailed, but we would retain the dam and bridge. So it's something we're considering and we're pricing a net present value on, but it's very uncertain and very unlikely that the regulatory agencies, FERC especially, would allow us to keep a dam in place if we weren't using it for hydropower. But it is a consideration that we are looking very closely at. So there is some chance that we could decommission, but yet the dam may stay in place. So there's that option. It's unlikely, but it could happen. And moving on to an impact that's going to be substantial to many people is projected and preliminary electric rate impacts that this project alone can basically have on everyone's electric bill. So just to be clear, this wouldn't be a percentage raise on the entirety of your utility bill from EWEB. It would just be prorated to the electrical portion of it. And essentially, we're looking between a 10 and a 15% rate impact, depending on the alternative chosen. So our cheaper return to service partially, or our decommissioned to stormwater alternative have a potential incremental rate impact of around 10%, and the full decommissioning or full return to service alternatives, if they were chosen, would have upwards to 15% rate impacts, over 30 years, or actually over up to 2040 is when these are extrapolated to. And so that's something, that everyone really needs to be mindful of, and just, be aware, and please provide us comments on, because this is a very impactful project. And just a couple of additional assumptions on these rates. I mean, there are preliminary and there's a lot of variables going into these rate impacts. These are with the assumption that we would have to finance this debt and not get grants and other revenue streams to pay for it. So this is just like a base case scenario. And so that's, why we're calling it super preliminary. And these rates are calculated to 2023 dollars. They're discounted back to our current dollars, essentially. And this is with a debt service coverage assumption of 2.0 and a bond rating of 5%, and also a 30-year financing period. So that's what these rate impacts are, assumptions present these numbers here.
We have another question here.
So
Yeah,
I
sure.
don't really understand what the numbers mean. I get the columns, but when it's, okay, just take the one at the upper left, $242. Is that over
No.
a year? What does that represent?
No. So yeah, I can just walk through this table really fast. So the top line here that's under alternative coming across is just essentially our alternatives, and a high, low, and an incremental analysis. And this high and low that we're showing in these columns here, those are intending to capture that -15 to +30% capital investment needs. So there's a wide range there. So there's also a range associated with the assumption of rate impacts as well. So if you see, the rate impacts under a lower capital investment scenario are, 8.8% here. And under the extreme high unlikely scenario of plus 50 on the high side, that stretches up to 17%. So those would be the variations in the rates. So these numbers here, 242.7, 257.8, 176, 175, et cetera, those are the NPV dollars, NPV costs we show in a couple slides above. So those are the all-in long-term costs of the project.
In
And
millions. So
and those
millions
are
of
in
dollars.
millions, exactly. Those are the negative 242 million essentially. And the rate impacts themselves here are in a percent. So these would be an assumed percent of your current electrical aspect of your current utility bill. So, we're assuming the worst case scenario, with the current assumptions that if we were to choose to go to full service and have the highest capital input and the most negative NPV, that, the dollars have to be captured back for that to pay for everything, that would be a 15.1% rate increase. So the actual rate impacts are this light blue line here. And then this next line here essentially is an average increase, a dollar value on an assumed single family home that consumes 1,600 kilowatts a month. So just an average single family home there. So these are the actual dollars in today's dollars, what the rate impact would be. So if we were to decommission to a stormwater alternative here, an average bill is likely to raise $17.83 over about 18 to 20 years. So that's not an immediate. So that's an incremental cost. So just to be aware of that. And the same with all of these costs. These are incremental raises in your utility bill as the project capital gets expended over the next 18 to 20 years. And one thing that is, needs to be really clear is these are not the only rate impacts that could happen. These are just project specific to the Leaburg challenge that we're facing. Any additional EWEB overhead or costs that need to be captured with a rate increase would be in addition to this. And this does not also include any water increases of rate increases there. So this is just talking about the electrical aspect of the energy delivered to houses. And the bottom column here is also just is a monthly bill impact for a similar house, a little bit larger household there. So I'm sorry, I take that back, a smaller household. And I have a typo there. That's supposed to say 1,200 kilowatt hours a month. So I apologize for that. So that would be a slight bit reduction in prices there.
We have another question here.
Yeah, I think you already answered it, Jeremy, but just to make sure I understood it. When you said that this is stretched out over 18 to 20-year period, so if we're looking at the partial return to service or the decommissioning to the stormwater channel, that's about a 0.5% rate increase per year over this the life of for paying for this.
Possibly a little bit more than that. So this incremental column here is really showing about 1.2% increase.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think that incremental column, what it's intended, so there's uncertainty as to what precisely this project is going to cost. Jeremy's been pointing out that it might be 30% more or maybe 15% less. And the incremental column, for every $20 million of change, either up or down, that would affect a 1.2% rate. So if this, looking at the decommissioning to stormwater conveyance, our baseline assumption is it costs $175.8 million. If it was 20 million more, actually, in actuality, that rate impact would increase from 10.3 plus 1.2, it'd go up to 11.5%. So that was just trying to give people a sense for the uncertainties that we have here. If that, as that the actual costs and end up being either higher or lower, these rate impacts would correspondingly go a little bit higher or lower. And so these are, our expectation would be that these would, you immediately see a 10.3% rate increase associated with the project once we go into the debt financing for the project. In order to cover that debt to pay for the project, we would have to increase the electric side of your utility bill by 10 to 15%, depending on which option the board selects.
And that's a good point, Mark. So that would be immediate and not phased in over the needs of the project dollars being used. Any questions on the rate impact slide? All right, and essentially we have identified, you know, the top 3 most impactful issues in each triple bottom line category. And on the financial side, on the economic side, the top 3 implications are going to be cost and rate impacts, as we just detailed in the last slide. And our financing and bond rating impacts, which all correlate the same, and our power price risk reduction. And essentially what we're classifying that as just, you know, hedging against the power purchasing market there. And on the social side, you know, we've the top 3 attributes that we have identified are public safety, the local economics, and local economics could be, you know, everywhere, all ratepayers wide, you know, due to the potential rate impacts that could have some impacts on individual households, and also the local economics affected by the tourism and the recreation that happens up near where the project is. And then also recreation. We've heard a lot of stakeholders from near the project, you know, have a lot of concern over maintaining the recreation up there. They use that recreation pretty faithfully. And on the environmental side, we have water quality, carbon footprint, and aquatic resources are our, you know, most impactful environmental aspects of the project. And we have questions and comments, but I am also going to jump ahead to this slide and just leave that open, just so I can let folks know that we have reopened public comment period. And this is a link you can access our comment form. And, you know, we love to hear from you. So please, if you have some time, go take our public comment survey. You can also email me, and you can call us. I mean, there's many ways you can provide your feedback, but this is probably the best way. And this comment form will be open through mid-December. So what we're doing is allowing for our recommendation, which we're going to put forth early December to our board. You know, once we make a recommendation, you can understand what that is by checking our board materials or keeping an ear to the meeting that happens on December 6th, and you know, providing feedback. You can provide feedback ahead of time as well. And also there's just more general information at the other Leaburg Canal information link as well that's in there. So we have a website. It's really easy to find. It's eweb.org/Leaburg Canal, and it'll bring up a lot of this information. And that's all I have for the presentation, but we're able to have any questions.
We have a queue going here. So Terry, then Patrick, then Matt.
And then Mary.
Oh, sorry, and Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate you guys putting together the video presentation. I was able to take a look at that this afternoon. I just wanted to jump back a little bit with safety. You know, you had mentioned public safety, and you made a comment about loss of life remains low. And is that in the event of a million-year flood or at all times due to seismic activity? And then my second question would be, I know you're making this available to people to weigh in on it, and I appreciate that so much. It is very costly. It looks like all of these options are extremely costly. Does EWEB have a preferred option at this time?
Well, we're getting close to having all the analysis completed here very soon. We're really kind of in the last, chasing our tail, getting that all put together, actually, and that will be put forth here in the next few weeks. So we're getting close on that, but we're still receiving additional data and public feedback. And essentially our final economic data is not in yet, but we're expecting that pretty soon. That will also help us refine our decision, our recommendation that staff is going to put forth. That does not mean that's the way the board will choose to vote. A recommendation is just our best guess at the best alternative and the pros and cons of such. And also, to caveat that, this is such a large undertaking when we do start going down a path that is selected, and there's so much uncertainty. It could morph into something a bit different. So, we're essentially looking to start going down a path, but once we bring in all the stakeholders and settlement parties and go through all the permitting and do all the design feasibility studies, we may find that what we thought was feasible may not be, and it may change and be agile along the way. So, we're just basically, the board's looking to just point us in a direction to really start drilling down on a path forward. So,
Yeah, Jeremy, and one other thing I was just going to say is that we will publicly provide our recommendation in advance of the upcoming board meeting in December. And so the board correspondence will include that recommendation, and then we will present it at the December board meeting as well, and field questions from the board at that time.
and that's usually available, like the Friday before the Tuesday meeting, Mark, typically, and sometimes a bit earlier.
That's right. Yep.
So yeah, I mean, please go find that on the EWEB website. And anyone that would like that, you can just reach out to me, and Kate knows how to get a hold of me. We've been emailing, so you can just grab my email from Kate, email me, and I will be happy to send you a link to where to find that information as well. So you can have it, read it. It's very detailed. It's a living document we've been working on for the last handful of months, and it's just getting larger and larger, but it's packed with detailed data, and it will put you to sleep. It's a good sleeper read. So please go find it and enjoy that before the next board meeting, and hopefully use that as a way to provide some comments to us, because our board does want to hear from you. Your comments and your opinions and your values do matter to all the board members. So the more folks we hear from, the better, and the easier it is to help us find a path forward.
And the last question.
Jeremy, she
Go
had
ahead.
a couple of questions about the public safety side of things. Let me
Right,
just
so-
address that one.
Yeah, go for it, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to just note that there's a variety of hazards that the canal presents, and you cued in on a couple of the big ones: the seismic hazard if we were to have an earthquake, and the flood hazard if we were to have, like Jeremy was talking about, an extreme storm event. Those are the big ones. And yeah, part of the reason why this project is so expensive is we would be improving the Leaburg Canal if it did return to service to a design criteria that meets modern expectations with respect to its seismic strength, with respect to its flood conveyance capacity. And so it would be a far safer canal than it is today if we were to return to service. We'd have to spend a lot of money on it to get it there, and that's a big part of why this project would be so expensive. That said, certainly operating a canal, even built to very high standards for seismic resistance, there's still some possibility that you could have a problem. And so from a public safety standpoint, the decommissioning options are superior. They're simply, basically, we have removed the hazard that the canal presents, even in improved condition. And then the low impact that Jeremy mentioned, that has to do with the fact that a problem at the canal is a very localized problem. You know, a lot of times when people think of, you know, what would happen if a dam breaks, it's a pretty big flood wave that comes to mind, you know, that moves down the entire river valley from the dam. In the case of the canal, you could have a problem anywhere along its 5-mile length. However, the canal itself really doesn't store that much water. And so the size of the wave that could come out of a canal relative to the size of a wave that could come out of a dam break is substantially smaller. And that amount of water that comes out of the canal, it'd be most dangerous to you know, anybody living between the canal and the river. And once that water gets to the river, it really wouldn't present a hazard to people living downstream along the river. So a pretty localized potential impact, but like Jeremy says, not zero impact. If you were unlucky enough to be in between the canal and the river, you know, there is a possibility that there could be property damage, injury, and a possibility of loss of life.
And, you know, also the dam itself does not impound a tremendous amount of water. So the dam is considered low hazard. Our problem is the canal is considered high hazard due to what Mark just explained. So even if the dam overtopped, it would not pose a large threat of a wave of water down the river.
Patrick, you're next.
With regards to the water rights, let me know if you can hear me. Is there, to generate the power, is there a timeline associated? Is it a perpetual right, or is it conditional for just the generation? And since you haven't been, it's been out of service since 2018, do you have a time frame that those water rights are, I guess, revert back, or you have issues, or would that be a FERC issue to try to get them back only?
Yes, great question. And yeah, currently there is a timeline, and it's a recent timeline. So it's a very complex issue. There was a recent Oregon Supreme Court decision. There was a lawsuit brought against Oregon Water Resources Department. And this decision was brought down in late December, or early January this past. And they gave a 5-year timeline for hydro projects that are not generating. We do see that as some risk. So we're nearing that clock. That shot clock is getting close for us. So there is some risk for us there. That's why we're noting it as a risk. However, we feel there'll be a remedy that we can manage, because we still are currently under FERC licensing. So, but there is currently a shot clock that is being attempted to be mitigated by other utilities as well. And that decision came from the Warm Springs Hydro Project out in Eastern Oregon, whereas a hydro project decommissioned in the late 90s, and they were perpetually re-anning up their water right, essentially. And that was the way that Oregon Water Resources Department recommended. So we've done the same thing. What we did was we did the Water Resources Department recommendation and leased an in-stream water right while we're figuring out our path forward. And that in-stream water right path and that remedy that used to work was put under the microscope, and the Supreme Court did rule against that. So to answer your question, we're getting within a year of needing to figure out what we're going to do and negotiate our water right with that risk.
I appreciate that. Good information. A follow-up to that quickly is, at that 5 years, is that to decide what you want to do and then you have a time frame for that, or that you have to actually have a project, generate power, break ground, something to that effect?
Right. No, the ruling is pretty clear that if you have not generated electricity within 5 years, that you can lose your water right. So, there's some risk mitigation, in the works. Hopefully, hopefully we'll be able to negotiate that risk, if we were to choose to go back to service. And we feel confident that we would be able to negotiate only because we are under a FERC licensing, and it doesn't seem as if the intent was of the decision was to harm folks that have reliable FERC licensing, with what we would call basically a beneficial use of that water, and hydro, clean energy, production is considered a beneficial use. So it might have been a little bit of a decision that wasn't fully considered in full when the decision was made. There was in reading the decision there, the Supreme Court did give a path through Oregon statute to remedy that, but when that path was researched, it doesn't appear as if it'll work. So there is some ability to negotiate that risk. So hopefully that is something we don't have to worry about, but there is that risk. And it is a big one.
Matt.
Yeah, thanks guys for the presentation. It's been great. And I have one question and one comment. And like Patrick said, let me know if you can't hear us. We're having some issues here. The comment is I'm in full support of the return to services. I filled out the survey saying such. I think it makes a lot of sense to rehab a great renewable energy resource that we have in our backyard, especially with the cost of getting rid of that resource and never being able to get it back, or having it difficult to get back. My question is, if one of the decommissioning options is chosen, what impacts does that have on the Walterville project?
Great question. And I'll take a stab, and this is such a complex issue. I'll let Mark back clean up on that. So where where the largest risk and impacts lie between Walterville and Leaburg is both of those hydro projects, even though they're independent of each other, are under one FERC license. And that entails whatever path we choose to go on, whether we decommission or return to service, the Walterville is going to have major implications financially, because when we open up the license for an amendment process to amend the Leaburg process, or to decommission or relicense, whichever path we choose to go on that relicense negotiation or license negotiations, Walterville will now be put full front and center, and any issues or license agreements and negotiations, settlement agreements that are going to be put forth by stakeholder groups will apply. And so the two are tied together, and if we have to spend some dollars to bring Walterville up to continue generating, those dollars will have to be spent. Any negotiations with water quality or with those dam safety issues over there, they'll have to be mitigated. So we can't not ignore Walterville when we start negotiating with the FERC and the other regulatory agencies on our path forward on Leaburg. They're synonymous with each other.
Yep, they both need to be addressed. Technically, the board could make an independent decision for each of the projects. But they are very interested in considering them both in combination. So that's one of the board questions that we're in the process of answering right now, is in addition to the long-term investment needs that we've detailed out for the Leaburg Canal, they're wanting to better understand what the long-term investment demands are going to be associated with Walterville as well. So technically independent. However, like Jeremy says, once the license gets opened up, the board will just inherently have to ask themselves the same questions about Walterville.
Thank you.
So this project gives us 5% of our energy is what I think I saw in the video that you provided us. Where does the energy that you provide to the community come from? Are we buying it off the market, or is any of it generated here?
Yeah, Jeremy, do you want me to give that? I can. give
Yeah,
you a
yeah.
quick rundown
Yeah,
on
you're
that.
gonna- Absolutely.
So yeah, Leaburg Walterville is one of 3 hydroelectric projects that EWEB owns. The other is Carmen Smith in the Upper Mackenzie. So if you've driven up further up the Mackenzie Highway, you would have passed Trail Bridge Reservoir right before you get to Clear Lake and Sahaley Falls, that area. So that's actually our largest hydroelectric facility. As Jeremy said, Leaburg is 15.9 megawatts, and Carmen Smith is 110 megawatts, so substantially larger. And then we also have a hydroelectric project on the Clackamas watershed up near Portland. It's another 10 megawatt facility. And then in addition to the hydro, we have some steam cogeneration ownership, and that's in Springfield. The mill the International Paper Mill that you drive past on I-105. There we have a steam turbine generator that uses their process steam to generate up to 30 megawatts of power. And then we also have some investments in a wind farm in eastern Washington. And that's about 20 megawatts of wind generation. So altogether, we have under EWEB ownership about 24% of the community's demand. The vast majority of the remainder comes from the Bonneville Power Administration, where we have a very favorable, tier 1, long-term customer contracts with the BPA. So that's the major source of our power supply. And then we also have some contract power supply. Few of the facilities you may have heard of are the Seneca Sawmill. They have a biomass plant there that EWEB is contracted to purchase power from. And then there's a few others kind of in that same category of wind projects that we have contracts to buy their power from. And that makes up actually on average more power than EWEB needs. That's why Jeremy was saying earlier that EWEB is long on power. That means that on average, we actually have more power either that we own, have under contract than we need. And so we do find ourselves needing to sell that excess power on the wholesale market as part of our normal operations. I would highlight though that everything I just said is on average, and you can have events, weather events that change that situation. So if we have a cold snap in December where temperatures drop below freezing for a sustained period of time, that is a situation that we do not have owned or contracted power supply to supply. So we do have to rely on the market in a situation like that, or in a summertime heat wave, temperatures over 100 degrees, everybody's using their AC. That's another time when local demand can rise above what we have under contract or ownership.
Great, thank you, Mark.
Mary, do you feel like your question about safest option in case of catastrophic earthquake was answered before?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay. And then I have another quick question, that there are a significant number of residents of Santa Clara who don't actually get their electricity from EWEB, we get it from EPUD. So
Right.
This rate increase then wouldn't affect those customers, or is EPUD getting energy from EWEB to No.
No, you're correct. They would not be part of the rate base needed to finance this project.
Okay.
But that does not mean as community members that they cannot provide a comment and feedback, because, you know, our facilities are open to all, and recreation, et cetera, and, you know, and folks' sentiment on green power, things like that. So that doesn't mean being an
Right.
EPOD customer doesn't mean you can't comment. We would still accept those comments and treat them just the same as if you were an EWEB ratepayer.
Yeah, good point, Jeremy. We have a lot of people who, you know, recreate up the McKenzie, not from near and far, who have, you know, shared opinions about the project.
Martha.
This is a little bit off topic, but I'm just wondering what's going on with the Carmen Reservoir. When I was camping up there last summer, I noticed that it's partly drained, and I wonder, you know, hearing all of this makes me wonder if that's another thing that's going to be a giant multi-million-dollar project.
There's all sorts of things going on up at Carbon Smith. You are right. So, so Carbon Smith recently received in 2019 a new operating license from the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, for 40 years. And so as part of that project, EWEB is investing a lot of money that's already actually reflected in your rates for financing an overhaul of the power generating facilities, the power plants, and then also fish passage. A lot of investments are going to be made up there on trap and haul facility, so that migratory fish, salmon, and bull trout can get above Trailbridge Dam. And we'll be also building a bunch of spawning habitats up there to hopefully increase the number of fish that come back every year to that part of the McKenzie. You were actually quite astute to note the lower level in Trailbridge. We have, for the past year approximately, been operating Trailbridge about 7 feet lower than we normally do. And that is related to a discovery in May of 2021 of a worrisome feature on the bottom of Trailbridge Reservoir. There was a little bit of information in the news about that, where we have a sinkhole that's developed on the bottom of that reservoir that is leaking water into the subsurface. Not a lot of water, and it's not a large sinkhole, but it's a worrisome feature that we are currently investigating, trying to understand what's going on there better, so that we can develop an action plan for remedying that situation. So relatively new development that we are still investigating, don't have a lot of understanding yet on how it's going to need to be addressed at this point in time, though.
Thank you. Got one more question here.
A follow-up to if EWEB is long on power, have you been that way for a while? And was that one of the reasons to deactivate the hydro facility in 2018? They just didn't really need it at that time?
No, that really was triggered by a internal erosion discovery, where, you know, seepage that Jeremy was mentioning there at the Cogswell Creek Reach had worsened to the point where it was eroding some material out of the embankment in a way that really wasn't acceptable. It needed to be dewatered and repaired. And then, like Jeremy mentioned, when we got the geotechnical drill rig up there, we discovered that we also had some liquefiable materials that would need to be addressed due to seismic concerns. So that was fully related to that dam safety discovery that we took it offline. can't remember. Was there another part to your question there?
Were you long on power then? Or is that a
Oh,
recent-
gotcha. Yeah, no, you're
Because
correct.
So
So
if
yeah,
you're
that's
low
a,
on power, and you could say, hey, we're not using that right now, and we
Yep.
discovered this, so it didn't take away your power supply from other things.
right. Yes, that's correct. We did have, since we had that excess supply, it wasn't difficult for us to adapt to the unexpected outage at Leaburg. That situation has persisted for quite a while, that we've had more supply than demand locally. And it's just been an interesting time, in the early 2000s during, if you recall back then when there was that Enron situation down in California that resulted in extremely high wholesale market prices for power for a period of time, resulted in rolling blackouts or brownouts in California. That era of electrical power scarcity triggered EWEB to invest in its supply, increase what we had under contract, because that was a rather painful period for the rate payers as well. And so we're hoping to avoid finding ourselves in that position again. And then you had a very interesting development where the growth of local demand pretty well plateaued in the mid 2000s, and then the economic recession started in 2008. And power demand locally did not increase as expected. It more or less plateaued for a period of time. And so that's really the driver that for us being long on power since really, I think right around 2006, 2007 is probably where that situation started.
Okay, well, I appreciate you being here tonight, and we're gonna wish you good night and move on to the rest of our agenda.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks again, and letting us take a whole hour plus, that's very, very helpful for us to get the word out. So thank you all. And thank you,
Yep.
Kate.
Thanks for your interest in the project.
We're gonna be sure to go ahead and post the video that you sent me about the history of the dam and hydroelectric project and the situation that is in today, and make sure we advertise that out to the neighbors, because that was super informative.
Very good.
Yes.
Super.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Have a great night all.